A very warm welcome to our special guests today, Chuck Tatham and Mike McCarthy, who are sharing their wisdom with us on how to create nature as a character into your games as part of this year's Jam. And Chuck and I briefly met at a Netflix event last year during Climate Week in New York. So thank you, Netflix, for having us at in the same place at the same time. And then Chuck and Mike, they go way back. So thank you, Chuck, for bringing Mike into this community. And thank you, Mike, for accepting that invitation. And I think this is the part where I'll hand over the mic to you two. And to everyone else, I hope you'll enjoy today's session. If there's any questions, drop them in the chat or keep them for the end or interrupt if you feel like it. I think that's okay, right, Charles, Mike?
Sure. Yep. Sure.
But yeah, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Okay. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And so Lisa came to Chuck and then to myself, and we wanted to talk about how storytelling in games can incorporate themes of nature. So that's what we're doing here. It's nurture yourself with nature and your players, nature, character, and conflict in storytelling. So we're going to get started here, and we're going to be telling stories that matter, how to give your stories more weight to deliver more weighted stories to the players. And while doing that, also have room to incorporate organically stories that matter to the environment, that drive thoughtfulness about nature and concerns for our planet. And I've been told that there's going to be some prizes at the end of this. But we also want to do it in a way that doesn't make it too preachy or inorganic and really kind of wedged in there. I'm sure we've played a lot of games where having some sort of message thrown at you is wedged in, and it's painfully obvious when it was just kind of tacked on. So what we're going to try to do is avoid that. And I'll introduce Chuck, and then I'll introduce myself. Chuck and I go, like Lisa said, we go way back. He's a TV writer currently in Toronto. Chuck?
I am. Greetings from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We're still part of Canada. Despite what Donald Trump might say, but this isn't a political forum, everybody. We're going to talk about storytelling. I am Canadian. I've written on shows you can see there: Arrested Development, How I Met Your Mother, Modern Family. The entire time, it's all been about story. The first show I ever worked on was a show you may recall called Full House, and it had I learned a lot there. One of the things I gathered was that the storytelling is important, but you have to have things in perspective. I couldn't tell which one was Mary Kate and which one was Ashley because they both played the Michelle character and they're identical twins. So I said to one of the older writers one day, how can you tell which one is Mary Kate and which one is Ashley? And he said, well, first you have to give a shit, which I thought was delightful. It was my introduction to television and show business and storytelling. And that was the kind of a healthy disrespect. I use the phrase healthy disrespect a lot because what we're doing in gaming and film and television is stories. We respect the craft. Don't get but keep your priorities right. We're talking about nature today, the environment, the climate, and that's important to me. And thank you so much, Lisa, for getting me involved. I'll throw it over to my good friend, Mike, who is very much in the gaming space. Go ahead, my friend.
Thanks, sir. So Chuck and my career trajectories took different paths right around 2007 when a strike happened. I had a colleague of mine, or I should say he became a colleague, but he was an old college friend of mine and said, hey, we need a writer for the new Medal of Honor. Would you be willing to do that? And that was in 2008, and ever since then, I've never looked back, and I've worked in the gaming industry since. And so I've shipped a number of games, first-person shooters, Medal of Honor. I worked in League of Legends. I wrote a Walking Dead mobile game. I've worked on Battlefield, and I've consulted on a few other games. And so I'm lucky in the industry that I've been able to work as long as I have and experienced all the different types of games, from AAA content to premium freemium mobile content. And so, but all of them have a constant through message that that you need to engage the players. And the best way to do that is with story. The interesting thing about story is that you'll find when you talk to somebody, and all of you devs know this, that everybody has an idea. Everybody has an idea for a story, and everybody's an expert. And good ideas can come from everywhere. As a matter of fact, there's tons of books and blogs and podcasts and Udemy classes that tell you how to write. And they're all fantastic. These are some of the ones that really kind of stood out to me in my journey here. And every one of these has great tidbits. But I think the one that stands out the most and will help us in having a solid foundation for not only telling great stories, but telling stories and incorporating the message of nature and how to save the planet and put those messages out there in a very organic way is William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade. The ironic thing about William Goldman is that he said nobody knows anything, and he says it many times in this book. Chuck, yes. Chuck had a funny story. He told me this. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
The fact of the matter is, if you read this book, this is a seminal book, and you might not, many people out there might not be old enough to remember the films that William Goldman wrote. Well, you can see on your screen, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Heat, The Princess Bride, Papillon, Marathon Man, All the President's Men. He was a legend. And I don't think it's on his tombstone, but it should be. Nobody knows anything. He says it, I think, on page 5. He says that on about page 8. And then a little bit later, he says it in capital letters. And that's his way of saying, no one really knows what's going to work. No one knows what story will work. And if they say this is an absolute slam dunk, it's going to work, they're often wrong. And if they say this is a flop, it can't work, they're often wrong. So consider, the point is well made, there's a lot of good advice out there, but consider certainly the source of any advice you get. Today you're getting advice from me and Mike, so consider the source.
Right. Perfect toss to me. So what are these two knuckleheads that are talking right now? What do we know? Well, we've been in these rooms for many, many years, and we know what works. We've tried it before, and certain things work. And all of those books that I showed you and all of the advice from the people that we've shared telling stories with, they have certain elements that we figured for this talk in this short period of time we could talk about. And 3 things that I think are fundamental to telling stories, not only on the screen, but in TV and especially games, and which is why we're here, is number 1, you need to start small. And we're going to go into detail into each of these as we go through this presentation. But start small. Every story has to have a beginning point. You have a blank page. You have blank lines of code. You don't have anything, but you need to start with something. And it's usually best to start with something small. You need to find a kernel of an idea, and then you build a temple around that kernel, and everything, if it's solid, and it could be a little thing. This little yordle could go to his well, go to the creek, and it's dried up. Oh shoot, what do I got to do now? And that leads you on, eventually we'll start talking about the hero's journey, but it leads you to that's the inciting incident, and it could lead you to things that are bigger, that have far-reaching ramifications.
Yep.
The second thing is connecting with emotion, and Chuck is going to be talking about this.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, people generate emotion. People resonate with viewers, gamers. Get to know those characters. Jaws, and even if it's a movie about a shark like Jaws, you got to get to know the people. Jaws didn't start with a shark attack. It's very early, but it didn't start with a shark attack. Apocalypse Now didn't start with meeting Brando, the main character, the most interesting character in Apocalypse Now. But Jaws had a 1,200-pound monster that we eventually meet. And I guess when you think of it, with Brando, that was a 1,200-pound monster. You eventually meet. I'm being unkind. Marlon Brando was a great actor. He was a little heavy at that point. The fact of the matter is, everything we do, we start small. Everything we do, we start small. It is tempting to start with missiles and volcanoes and sharks, but you are going to captivate a far more intrigued, more curious audience if you start small.
That's absolutely right. And the emotional content is very important to connect with those emotions. If you can't connect with basic human emotions, you're just dead in the water. To have a story, you need to create empathy. You need to create aspirational characters, and it doesn't matter if your character is a space marine, or if it's a yordle, or if it's Baba. Your players are all humans, and they need to connect with those emotions with the game and the characters in the game. And once we talk about connecting with the emotion and starting with that small incident, that the small thing that matters to that character, then we can do the thing and make it bigger and make it matter. Make that small thing, and with the characters that you've built around that small thing, you can make the epic journey to Mordor and make it really matter. And that's especially true with things that have to do with nature and our planet. It might just seem like, oh, this well is dry, or wow, it hasn't been sunny here in a couple of days, or this mage's elemental magic that they were able to conjure up weather storms and rain doesn't work anymore. But those things matter to the people that surround them. So that's an important thing. And now, I mean, I think those are just 3 things. There are a million things in those books, and you can it's how many different ways can you screw up a golf swing? There are many, but I think if you nail these 3 things, it makes all the other things, the building of the levels and how to communicate with your artists and your designers, it makes it much, much easier if you have solid foundational roots in these 3 things. So by starting small, I worked on a couple of shooters, Medal of Honor, Battlefield. I'm working on one now, and everybody wants to go big. We want to have all the explosions. We want to have everything going off. We want to fly the F-22 Raptor. We want to have the sticky Semtex bombs. We want to do everything, and we want to go big and have it in there. And then we pull back and do the small other things. And I put this picture up here because it's photo of the opening scene in Saving Private Ryan, and it's big. It's the whole beach scene with the Higgins boats landing on the beach, people getting their heads blown off, and Tom Hanks's character making his way to the beach and getting up into the pillboxes. And so that's big. But a lot of people, I'm sure many of you here probably might see where I'm going next. Many people know that this is the scene that starts the movie. The fire, the gunfire, the Higgins boats, all that blood and guts doesn't start until 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the film. And that 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the film is an old man, his wife, his kids, and his grandkids walking through a cemetery at Normandy. And it's really emotional for anybody, for Americans, for the French, for anybody who has some sort of connection, emotional connection to World War II. And many people do, whether it's their grandfather, their great-grandfather. And so then you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, something's happening here that's of significance, and I'm emotionally invested in this thing now.
Yep. And adjacent to that, in the category starting small, adjacent to that is don't overload the front of your story. Even if it's small characters and small things, one of the problems we have with TV pilots, the first episode of any series, one of the problems is there is an instinct to absolutely load the front of the story with every possible thing you're going to need to want to know. And I strongly recommend be brave. Don't put it all there. Let people be curious. Let people get there. Again, the greatest actor in the world was Marlon Brando. He did a movie called The Godfather. It was about a crime family, a mafioso crime family. It begins with a character we almost never see again. He's this baker you see an hour later. He's very secondary. Secondly, you cut to Brando eventually. He's patting a cat. So you're instantly wondering, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Eventually, there's all kinds of excitement and carnage and gunplay. But I defy anybody to watch the first 5 minutes of The Godfather and bail out. You're going to want to know what happens. So resist the temptation to overload the front with all the things everybody's got to know.
Yeah, and that's hugely important. And with games, it's incredibly important too. And it's difficult because we live in a world with first person in the AAA space, first person shooters. You got to give them all the stuff. You want all the explosions, everything. And this is a screenshot from the opening scene of The Last of Us, the first one. And as we all know, I'm sure everybody's played this game. It starts out with Joel and Tommy and Sarah racing their pickup truck through town, explosions everywhere, and then that horrible thing that happens at the end of this sequence. But again, everyone here knows that it doesn't start there. You have at least 10 minutes playing as Sarah in the house, in her bedroom, walking around, looking at things on the wall, achievement hunting, opening drawers, looking at things, getting emotionally connected to her and her life and the people who live around her. And then things start happening. You hear answering machine messages, you see things happen outside the window, and then you get to the point where you're in the pickup truck with Joel and Tommy and the shit's hitting the fan. Because you want to, and Chuck mentioned it earlier, you need to want to know what happens next. And you dole out those little bits of that very, very sparsely in the beginning. And this isn't the right way, but this is just, these guys did this, Naughty Dog did this, in a world in 2012 when everything was modern warfare and you got to have all these huge multiplayer games. They made a single player campaign and they started out with a girl walking around her house listening to telephone messages, but it worked. And it was so, you felt so rewarded for going through that process, and you developed an affinity for Sarah. So I have another image that I want to do, and it's we talk about these things that are big, and here's a perfect example of something that's small. This is the game Limbo, and this game opens up. It's a side-scrolling. It's a fantastic game. I'm sure everybody's played it, and it's sort of sequel inside. But you want to know what happens next when you're that little boy and you press the controller. You don't even know how to work the controller, and he wakes up, and you're going right. That's all you need. You're emotionally bought in. You want to see what happens next. And if you're not able with that little teeny small thing in the beginning to want to know what happens next, then people put their controller down, they change, or they used to change the channel, they stop the streaming, they do whatever, and then they go to something else. So I'll finish this little section just talking about my own experience. Working on Medal of Honor, we needed to come up with a game that was going to be representative of 9/11. Not a small event. Hasn't been small for 25 years. We've lived with the events in the aftermath of 9/11. But in 2008, we were tasked with, what do we do to make this not small thing resonate emotionally with players and make a story around that little idea? So what we did was we did a lot of research, and we found that there was an event in the opening stages of the war on terror in Afghanistan called Operation Anaconda. It was the fight for the Shiakat Valley. And there was a Navy SEAL who was going to land on the top of this mountain to root out some terrorists that were in a pillbox that were over this valley that was going to create problems for the Army Rangers that were there the next day. He falls out of the back of the Chinook in the middle of the night, high altitude in the snow. And that was the little moment in the thousands of people who were dead, everything that happened in the aftermath of 9/11. We decided to talk about this moment of this Neil Roberts, who fell out the back of a Chinook helicopter. And that was the story, how we get this guy back. And so all the levels were different perspectives on how we were going to get there. Quickly, when I worked at League of Legends, we were trying to come up with a champ for Noxus. And Noxus is this incredibly threatening, it's an incredibly threatening area of Runeterra that has these very powerful, this powerful war machine, and the champs Mordekaiser, Swain, Draven, they're all these very strong people. So we thought, okay, how do we make this something smaller? And so what if there was an orphan from Noxus that was forced to be a conscript on the front lines of all their wars? And what if they escaped to Ionia? And that orphan grew up through the tutelage of Zed and became a member of the Order of Shadows, and he's Cain, and he wields a darkened scythe. So we started with a very small thing out of this big area of Runeterra, Noxus, that is known for being just brutalist and very kind of Doom-like. But we decided to go and make something a little bit smaller. And yeah, so that's how we start with the small thing. And Chuck's going to talk about how we connect with emotion from this point.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Couple of things just as we're discussing them. As writers, we have to be artful. Connecting with emotion takes time. You have to be artful. I'm just going to say quickly, if a husband says to his wife, "How's everything at the hospital where you're a heart surgeon?" That doesn't work. Husband would say to his wife, "How's everything at work?" Think about who the characters are, how they feel, and what's the real. The other thing I'll say is people come to me with stories and they don't have strong characters. You got to do both. You've got to come up with a strong story, which is very important and very difficult, but just as difficult is the characters. And connecting with emotion is what you do with the characters. I can't think of a story where you're connecting through emotion with a story. Nature is a character that we're specifically talking about today, because nature is a new one. It's always been around, but I'm writing a movie right now where an approaching hurricane isn't the center of attention. It's what we call a MacGuffin. It's something that is a plot point used to start the action, but ultimately not super duper important. But it kicks things off because instead of being shiftless losers, the teenagers in this film decide they have to do the items on their bucket list now, because next week they could be gone because of the hurricane. It's called putting a clock on your story. Always think about putting a clock on your story. Oh, I've got to go to the store. Not that interesting. Oh, I've got to go to the store because they're blowing it up in 4 minutes. A little more interesting. The question is always why now? Why are we telling this story now? And why are the characters behaving this way now? It's a question a lot of TV and film executives ask. And for instance, in the film that I'm writing, they're getting the things done on their bucket list now because there's a hurricane approaching, or whatever it is. The monkeys just mutated into monsters. They were nice monkeys till around breakfast. Now they're ripping people's faces off. And also, further to that, think about this. If your story has been on, it's a game, it's a movie, it's a show, a year or 2 or 3, how do you extend it? How do we give things more life? And one of the things we do in television is bring in a new character. And in the Brady Bunch, the show in the 70s, they brought in there he is, there's Oliver. And a lot of you folks don't remember the Brady Bunch, but it was a show with 8 great characters, 9 if you include Alice, the housekeeper. She was a very powerful performer. But by season 7 or 8, the kids in the show were, they had beards and mortgages. They were all just kind of grown up. How do we revive this? How do we keep it going? They brought in Oliver. Today, we're talking about bringing in nature as a character. And as powerful as Oliver certainly was, using nature as a character is something that's profoundly efficient and profoundly topical.
Right. And I'm just going to add, Chuck, that adding nature as a character is something that you're going to get to it, but it's something that takes a little weight off of us writers and creators and allows the developers, whether they're artists, designers, engineer, to mess with a different set of dials and knobs, that it's just not somebody moving through an NPC or a player character. You can create things with nature. There could be a rush of water happening in a certain level. I know that there's people here from Monument Valley. You guys absolutely in your game create nature as a character. And I love that game, by the way, all of them. And so I think it's beneficial that I'm sure you already do think of, oh, how do I block this player from getting to this thing? There's a waterfall here, or how do I turn that off? And then maybe a couple levels later, you'll see that that water is going to feed something that you need. So if you turned it completely off, that water wheel wouldn't go. So not making them a different type of character that really frees you up to write in a different way.
Yep. Develop your characters is crucial. We're looking at George Wendt. George Wendt played Norm Peterson in a show called Cheers, and he was unbelievable. If you work hard to develop characters like Norm, it makes, and here's a funny thing. I'm a writer, which is a fun way of saying I'm lazy. I want to do as little work as possible. I think it's right there. Well, how do you do less work, Chuck? Well, if you develop your characters, a strong, defined character, it makes writing them easier. What they would do and what they would say are easier to access. And 1,000 times in my career, we've been struggling with what a character would say or do because we didn't spend the time and energy on the character. If you spend the time to develop a character and their backstory, it's a pain in the butt, but once you do it, you get a character like Norm Peterson in Cheers, who loved beer. Among other things, we established he loved beer. Thus, when he entered the bar and Woody the bartender said, "Hey, Mr. Peterson, want a beer?" all he had to do was stare into the camera and got a big laugh. It was a character laugh. It meant it was easier on the writer and it was easier on the audience. It's very satisfying when you're laughing before things even happen because you know the characters so well. Seems kind of simple, but to sit down and really sweat who a character is takes time. Also, adjacent to that, it does help sometimes to have a normal character near the center of your story. Basically, Frasier's father, Martin in Frasier, or back in the day, it was Mary Richards' character in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, or Marge in The Simpsons. A sensible character. I worked on Arrested Development, and our reasonably reasonable character in the middle was played by Jason Bateman. Everybody else around him was a nut. I think we'll just see some evidence of that right now.
I can't help you.
I know. It did bother me that they did so well without me, but I do have to ask them for help.
And I have to ask for an audition.
Do you have an audition yet?
Oh, no, I'm not in the group yet. No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
There's got to be a better way to say
that. That is, to my mind, is so much funnier when you had the normal character representing the audience going, this Tobias is a madman. You know, a man covered in blue paint talking about, a lot of things we did on Arrested were like that, and they worked better because we established Michael as the central character as being fairly reasonable. We're in the make-believe business, but obviously we've seen some of that. But if we want to have a small effect on the way gamers think about the environment, it also matters to have the information come to them from a voice that they trust. If you get that sensible character, if you spend a little time on that character, who can be funny, entertaining, engaging, etc. It's a little trickier, but if you do that, that's a voice the audience will trust. And specific to what we're doing today, wouldn't it be great to have people trust your characters? Chris Lloyd, by the way, was my boss on a couple of shows. He won a lot of Emmys on Cheers and Frasier and another show I worked on called Modern Family. Think about this. This is an exercise you can do, and it's extraordinarily helpful. It's called rolling a grenade into the room. Think of all your characters in a room, and someone rolls in a grenade. Each character should have a specific individual reaction to the grenade that no other character would have. Norm Peterson might say, "Crap, I hope that grenade doesn't go off before I finish my beer." Cliff Clavin was the trivia spewing know-it-all. That particular grenade has a blast radius of 78 feet. Sam Malone was the womanizer. I wish I'd gone on that first date at lunch with the stripper before I get blown to bits by this grenade. And of course, the misanthrope was Carla. who would probably say something like, "You're all weasels, you deserve to be blown up." It's a very simple thing. It's a very simple technique, and I strongly recommend it. It clarifies things that can feel vague and tricky. And if you apply this to nature, how would these different characters respond to a hurricane? Yes, it feels like they might all have the same response. Oh no, there's a hurricane, we're gonna die, it's gonna wreck everything. But if you get into, if you go past it, and one character says, "I don't want to die because I'm getting married tomorrow," or a character might say, "I don't want to have my pizzeria blown up because I make money making pizza." Whatever your specifics are, don't have this monolith. Don't have everyone reacting the same way to a situation. It's easy, but it's not real. The next point of business, I think, is to talk about dialing down the pessimism. I'm by nature an optimistic guy, and in this particular realm, talking about nature, talking about the environment, I don't recommend a pessimistic view. There is room for a lot of pessimism, and I know that video gaming has lots of dystopian stuff. And when it comes to nature, though, I don't know if we need more of that. And I'm not preaching. I'm just saying, think of it this way. You can start with pessimism and work your way towards optimism. The previous example, the monkeys are ripping our faces off. That's a fun way to, I don't know about fun, but if the monkeys are ripping our faces off, it's something that feels pessimistic. But if you could get to, wow, having my face ripped off by a monkey isn't so bad. I can't keep on my glasses without a nose, but hey, now I don't have to shave anymore. There's an upside to having your face ripped off by a monkey. I was up late thinking, what's the upside to having my face ripped off by a monkey? Anyway, not only do we have the opportunity in gaming to provide a hopeful message, we can send our characters to a new place and hopefully do it with accuracy. Try to be accurate. We are, again, we're in the fiction game, but when you think of Billy Bob Thornton's character, Tommy Norris in Landman, the show Landman, he's a guy who manages oil fields, and as powerful and as dramatic as his speeches and his monologues might be, they're sometimes inaccurate. I was at an environmental comedy event in New York the other day, and it was surprisingly hilarious. When you think environmental comedy, you might think, that doesn't sound great. It was spectacular and it was informative. They showed clips. There's a guy, I think his name was Raleigh Williams, and one of Billy Bob's speeches talked about how a wind turbine takes 20 years to erase its carbon footprint. The fact is, it takes about 5 months. Bottom line, you don't have to be accurate. But if the choice is providing solid information or misinformation or disinformation, why not help planet Earth and get it right?
Right.
The next up, we're going to talk to Mike about making it bigger, not just making it bigger, making it matter.
Right. Yeah. So it's only fitting that I had the three things: make it start small, connect with emotion, make it bigger, make it matter. And I think probably there's not one of you in attendance here that's not familiar with the hero's journey. And the reason why is because it's a really great structural piece of how to tell stories and the narrative foundation of most stories. You can point at any movie or game or TV show, and you can probably place a lot of the elements on this the hero's journey chart here. But the two things that we talked about initially, we're right here. You know, once you have your little inciting incident with your character that you've given the little nuanced details about themselves and the people that are around them and their environment around them, now you're able to do the heavy lifting because you set a foundation that's very, very solid. And so then you start asking the questions. What does our character want? These are the needs and the goals and the motivations for your character. And then a lot of people say you take your character, get him up a tree and throw rocks at him. You know, that's what happens if they don't get the thing. That this is the stakes, the objective, and their failures happen here. And then as Chuck talked about, a ticking clock. Why do they need these things now? What does our character want? What happens if they don't get it? Why do they need it now? Those are absolutely foundational to making a story work. And the thing that's unique about gaming is that the writers, narrative designers, anybody in the building can offer those little things. A lot of the most functional places that I've worked at, every good idea gets a voice. And you can't, oh, he's not a writer, he can't do this, or I'm not an engineer, I don't know how, I'm not a designer, I don't know how to do that. But if you have an idea and it's doable, there's no bad ideas to at least float them. But once you have that, the character, the small thing, now all the disciplines can get together and go, what's important? Well, I think this is important. And the best thing about that is people bring their own unique perspectives to how they view that character and what their needs are, what their obstacles can be, and what's the important thing that's driving them to do that now. And all of these things can be done by everybody else, not just writers, but designers, artists, producers. Everybody can do these things. And then, yes, we can throw nature in there because we've done that foundational work. So we can have, a Yordle with Ivern, the friend of the forest in League of Legends, and Lux, who's an environmental mage that wields the power of light, and going against Noxus. And then when you do that, you have your epic journey. You have your hero's journey when you combine all of those things. So, we're getting close to the end, so I'll try and wrap it up. I mean, I know that last part, but that last part is very, very important, but it's all of you. It's the designers, like I said, it's all of those people that are helping. So what are we talking about? We're talking about starting small. Every story has to start somewhere. Find that kernel of an idea and build a temple around that. Connect with emotion. Three-dimensional characters who evoke real, believable, empathetic, and human emotions. Doesn't matter if your character is a Yordle or Baba. The players, like I said earlier, are human. I don't know anybody who knows what it feels like to be the last white rhino walking Earth, but I certainly know what it feels like to be the last kid picked at the playground, and no tears to be shed for this, but it's the same feeling of abandonment and being alone. And those are the things that you as a maker of video games, as a creator of content, need to tap into those emotions and apply them to the Yordle, to apply them to the Mordekaiser, apply them to anyway, and then by doing that, you're going to make your game bigger and better.
Yep. And if I can just add, and I know we're getting towards the end, whatever your story is, and however great your characters are, two quick rules maybe to remember. One is an oldie. See it, don't say it. It's an oldie, but please, it's a visual medium. See it, don't say it. It feels easier just to sort of say it. Everybody would rather see it. And one that you might not be aware of is a saying that we have in the writer's room: endings make stories. Let's not do what we call a road to nowhere. Let's not spend a lot of time and energy on a story that doesn't have an ending. It's extraordinarily hard to think up the ending of some of these stories. And indeed, in gaming, sometimes the story continues. But if you can think of some finite destination, some satisfying way to tie things up, it's really a fundamental part of storytelling. Because if you don't know how to end something, ultimately it's very inefficient. And if you don't know how to end it, there's always a sort of an awkward silence.
Right.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, as we're ending, yeah. And I was just before everybody arrived at the meeting, I'm going to mention this real quick, Lisa. There's a woman who's known as the script whisperer in Hollywood. She's been around for a very long time. Her fingerprints on every great movie that you probably have seen or heard of. Her name is Lindsay Doran, and she did this wonderful TED Talk, and it speaks directly to what Chuck was just mentioning about endings matter. And her TED Talk, it's short, it's on YouTube, you can find it, Lindsay Doran, 2012, I think, and it says, saving the world or kissing the girl. And she basically talks about the second thing that we talked about, how important it is to connect with emotion, because then that ending will pay off at the end, like Chuck mentioned. So if you have the opportunity, take 20 minutes and look up her TED Talk. And Lisa, you have some stuff to discuss and about the contest. Oh, and
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say thanks, everybody. This was fun. I always enjoy talking to people about stories, and certainly enjoy talking to Lisa and talking to Chuck. It's been a while.
Oh, hey, and we're ready for your questions. I mean, I can't.
Yes, I would say let's dive into questions, and we'll make sure we send the link to the TED Talk of Lindsay Doran as well, so that everybody has the opportunity to watch that. But I saw a question from Matthias in the chat. Does an ending have to be optimistic?
It does not have to be optimistic. I think I'm in comedy, so I very, very, very rarely have a dark ending. I know gaming can certainly lean into that. However, we're talking about nature and the environment, so it doesn't have to be optimistic. I would strongly recommend it. That's the way we're going with our messaging in environmental activism. We're going towards hope. We're going towards figuring it out, you know? And so it's a little easier to say, and we're screwed. Well, I work with partner and try and say, we're not screwed. Life is tricky, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, I'll just add on top of Chuck that well, first, Lindsay Doran's speech talks about leaving whatever story you're telling optimistically. But I will quickly cite the movie Seven, one of the most dark Kevin Fincher movies that there is. And you can look at the ending of that movie, and I won't spoil it for people, but there's a scene where Morgan Freeman's character, they say, hey, where are you going to be? And he says, I'll be around. And, this horrible thing happened. And he then has this monologue from an Ernest Hemingway quote where he says, the world is a fine place and worth saving. And he says, I believe in the second part. So these horrible things happen in Seven, murder, and just in a horrible way. And it would be a total downer of an ending if you know what happens. But his optimism of, I'm not quitting the police force. The world's a horrible place and worth saving. The world's a wonderful place and worth saving. I believe in the second part. It's not a horrible place, but he's going to save it. So that's a very great, And yes, Louisa, you're right.
A little bit further to that, and I won't hopefully spoil anything, the classic movie Midnight Cowboy has a sad ending, but it's the story of the human spirit. I'm not going to suggest that Midnight Cowboy is a feel-good movie, but it's not relentlessly dark. You walk away from it having seen a journey of two people that came to know each other and, frankly, I think sort of love each other.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Matthias. And with that, there's another question from Josh, who's curious to hear what a good ending might look like in a game, where it closes threats off without feeling anti-climactic. Say you defeat the big bad and there's no danger anymore. How do you make that a satisfying ending without sort of showing credits?
No. How do you make the big boss fight being defeated a satisfying ending? Well, I think in those games, God of War or Bloodborne, any of those games where you've acquired skills and leveled up your character to the point where or Alan Wake 2, where you can beat the bosses at the end of the game, you feel empowered. So that's an uplifting ending because you've learned throughout the game to how to fight, what builds to have on your character in order to create the fight. But maybe on that journey, there's something that you encountered, that a character, an event, something that you did that you had agency in, that will create another problem for the next. It's an open thread. There's plenty of examples of that. The bad version is the horror movie where the person defeats Jason and then he or she are sitting there, whew, I'm glad I did it. And then in the background, you see the it's the monster's rising up or the monster's not there. That's kind of cheesy, or it wasn't cheesy the first time, but it became cheesy.
Yeah.
But maybe along the way, oh, I let that thing out, like the ring. Oh, you didn't let her out, did you? There's a way to set that up in your story that maybe that wasn't the only boss. Maybe there was, two, or I don't know, but there's a way. You have to feel satisfied by killing a boss at the end of a game, though.
Yeah, and I think also if you look at something like the Mission Impossible franchise, we won this chapter. But the overall overarching challenges will continue. If you can foster that environment in your game or your film or your show, so it doesn't have that there's nothing beyond this sort of sensibility.
Thank you. Josh, I hope that answers your question. And then we move on to Alan with another question. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I have both an observation and a question. I've observed that nearly every future-facing game, not fantasy, not science fiction, but future-facing, is dystopian. Hundreds of billions of hours of lean-forward immersion in dystopian worlds. I think there's, zeitgeist, there's production reasons. A post-apocalyptic world doesn't, has some zombies and some stray animals, that's efficient. There's all sorts of reasons, conflict, visuals, but we have to be able to imagine futures we want to build. And if popular media, games, TV, novels are not presenting those, I think that's a challenge. So I'll turn it into a question. Do you know of examples of what I would call not utopian, but evocative, aspirational, achievable futures that can provide collective visions? And then the question is building the agency individually and collectively towards building those futures, and crucially, the feedback that your agency is making a difference. It seems to me that's the secret sauce we need to find.
And I will jump in very quickly, Alan. Thank you for that very astute question, and greetings to everyone in the greater Phoenix, Scottsdale metro area. I'm going to throw you an example from Modern Family. I think it's on point. We created Cam and Mitch as a gay couple, not with a political agenda. We normalized that. By normalizing that, we got 10,000 emails and 100,000 texts and 40,000 letters. Thank you for presenting that. Thank you for giving us that hope. Families where mom and dad didn't talk to the gay son anymore, laughing at Modern Family. Really? Oh, that's how it is? Yes. We said this is contrary to what you think, contrary to what pessimism or negativism you're bringing to the party. We're presenting things the way they could be, should be, ideally would be. And that was not the agenda. We didn't start with that agenda. Steve Levitan, Chris Lloyd, when I began the show, they just wanted to show, I think, a modern family with a positive trajectory. So as far as climate is concerned, or nature or environment in games, I think I'll put a finer point on it. It's not about climate, environment, nature. It's a smart, interesting, compelling game that has positive elements of that imbued in it. And I'll defer to Mike on that because he's the gaming guy. But I know that you can do that. And to your point, Alan, get positive feedback. We didn't even know we were going to get the thousands of responses. We were just trying to make a funny show that resonated.
Yeah, it's it's a very nuanced question, as Chuck said, Alan, and it's the games that we work on. We're in an environment where the games, they cost a lot of money to make. They need to sell a certain amount to continue. But we need to, you want to have agency. Are you speaking specifically about elements of agency in the space of nature, in a positive message for nature? Is that specifically what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm making the connection. I mean, one of the things that makes games engaging for so many, especially young people who don't have agency, or feel like they don't have agency in the real world, is you have agency in a game. You act, you make a difference, but crucially, you get feedback that your difference is making a difference in the game world towards whatever the goal is. I want to map that from the digital world to the physical world, but through storytelling. So the agency is meaningful agency that my actions, not just individually, but collectively make a difference towards the goal that I and we are invested in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's absolutely the opportunity to do that. What was that game that it was on Steam? It was called That Monster Cancer. That was all. I mean, you have cancer in the name of a game, and you're really not trying to sell, millions of copies. But that was such a tremendous game that really kind of gave that emotional connection to dealing with having a terminal disease. Now, I don't think EA or Ubisoft or anybody's going to, spend, $250 million to make a game about that. But you can have, a character that in a big AAA franchise that will speak to the triumph of the human spirit dealing with something like that. And as far as creating agency outside the game world, if it just helps you think, wow, I'll use Monument Valley as an example. I turned off that switch that had that waterfall, and I was able to get to the end of this one level, but that water was off and I couldn't get to the other level and I was stuck. It's like, so there was ramifications for me doing this one thing that I didn't see, unintended consequences. So if we're able to make people think about unintended consequences of doing something that are not only that have to do with nature, but could be positive too. Hey, I turned that thing on, and then when I went to the next level, there was all these flowers that were in the environment because I allowed water to go through there. I mean, I think those are ways that you can hopefully make people think and not be at some sort of discussion around a campfire where it's overbearing. Be good, and then we'll leave it. Because it's a tough question. I'm not sure that I exactly satisfied you, but.
And quantifying the positive result is murderously difficult with climate change and nature, environmental activism. That's the one we're wrestling to the ground. And the thing that we sometimes invoke is the anti-war activist in 1968 who said, these protests, the work we do today will not be felt today, tomorrow, next month, or next year. They will ultimately be felt. We're doing the right thing now. And that's very hard in a commercial space. In a commercial space, so how does that sell my game? How do I, but it's almost like we're saying, nature, you're allowed to do the right thing regarding nature in your games. You're allowed to be positive. You might not reap the rewards, and when you do reap the rewards, you may not even know it. So it is an amorphous thing, and I apologize, but that's the thing we're wrestling. The whole entire culture is wrestling with. Am I making a difference, and when will I be making a difference?
Yep.
Thank you. I hope, Alan, that was helpful. We have 4 more minutes left. One more question from Eric. Go for it, Eric.
Thanks, Mike and Chuck. Hey, a lot of mobile games are weak on story because, the game is never supposed to end. The developer just provides the setting and characters, and the story emerges from the players battling each other or playing together. So what's your advice to us now when we take this message to our teams that, what are the benefits of thinking about all this great advice that you gave us today, like the hand grenade example, for example. So what's your advice when we go talk to our teams?
I think the best way to think of it, Eric, and I'll let Mike jump in, is if you have 4 minutes, whatever that is, doing things on the B side. And by saying doing things on the B side means a lot of time in storytelling, we do things on the A side. I am this way, ergo, I'm going to behave that way. If you do it on the B side, you see the behavior and then you explain it. And that's very provocative. If you only give me 3 minutes, I'm going to show you a guy drinking motor oil. Why is he drinking motor oil? We're going to find out we call it on the B side. We're not going to say, I enjoy drinking motor oil, and then get into it. And I know that's a kind of an odd example. I don't know if we know anyone who drinks motor oil, but that, to my way, and I'm an old ad man. I was in ad agencies before this. Curiosity, the hook. It's called the hook. And so if it's on this guy and you got 3 minutes, curiosity, don't be brave. They don't understand what's going on. They're not going to get it. They're going to have to wait a minute or 3 to figure it out. That's what I strongly recommend, because they're going to want to find out. When you're in a movie and you don't know what the hell is going on, and you lean over to your partner and say, I don't know what's going on. And they say, neither do I, but I can't stop watching. that's the effect we seek, whether it's a long form game or a little guy.
Yeah, mobile games are tough. You know, when I worked on The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman said, "Hey, let's tell the story of course they wanted the main characters, you know, they wanted Rick Grimes and they wanted Negan and they wanted everybody from the comics, but what's happening with the characters in the background of the television show or in the graphic novel? That was the thing that he wanted to do, but you're up against making the game sticky, right? And nobody listens to mobile games, but if you have Limbo on your iOS device, that draws you in. And exactly to Chuck's point is you need to want to know what happens next. And maybe you could dress the game up with little details that go, oh, why are there flowers here? And then the next level I got to, there are no flowers. There's a famous level in Uncharted 2 where you go through the level and everybody is scared of you, is scared of your player character, and you're walking through, and then you helped save that village from something, and the next time you walk through, they created animations. When you walked up to an NPC, they put out their hand and said thank you. So it was a small detail that showed that your playing of 3 levels before created an outcome on the B side, like Chuck said, that pays off. And so if you can do that, it's tough with hitboxes and ARPU and all that stuff that you have to deal with in the mobile space. But you got to find a way.
And thank you.
Thank you,
everyone, for being here, being so bright and so involved, and not asking about the color of the wall behind me. There's no explanation for that. I'm gonna lie awake at night tonight thinking, was I in a giant tomato? What is this place in Canada? No, thank you so much, everybody. This is extremely important, and I turn it over to our friend Lisa. And thanks, Mike. That was great.
Thank you, Charles, Chuck. I'm just reading your name now, which is always confusing me because it says Charles on the screen. But thank you, and thank you, Mike, for being here today and sharing this with us. And thanks for everyone who was able to make it. And as always, we have the recording of this that we'll share with you if you want to rewatch it. If there's any questions that come up afterwards, when you go into your evening or into your day, wherever you are, let me or Louisa know, and then we'll be happy to follow up and see if we can still get an answer for you. But with that, I would say thanks, everyone. Have a nice day, evening, and we're very much looking forward to see all your activations come to life, and we hope that this was helpful.